Here I was thinking that the president, who views himself in the mold of Jesus Christ himself, might actually take the opportunity to reflect on the teachings of Jesus on this Easter holiday. Man, was I wrong. Trump took to Truth Social today, writing, "Happy Easter to all, including the radical left lunatics who are fighting and scheming so hard to bring murderers, drug lords, dangerous prisoners, and the mentally insane and well-known MS-13 gang members and wife-beaters back into our country. Happy Easter also to the weak and ineffective judges and law enforcement officials who are allowing this sinister attack on our nation to continue, an attack so violent it will never be forgotten. Sleepy Joe Biden purposefully allowed millions of criminals to enter our country, totally unvetted and unchecked, through an open borders policy that will go down in history as the single most calamitous act ever perpetrated upon America. He was, by far, our worst and most incompetent president, a man who had absolutely no idea what he was doing, but to him and to the person that ran and manipulated the auto pen, perhaps our real president, and to all of the people who cheated in the 2020 presidential election in order to get this highly destructive moron elected, I wish you, with great love, sincerity, and affection, a happy Easter." And look, I'm not going to respond to these inane rantings and ravings on this post because it is reflective of a person who is deeply, deeply unwell. But I do want to zoom out here and reflect on the fact that Donald Trump's return to office was heralded as some huge win for the evangelical community, who Trump claims to represent. Finally, those godless heathens on the left are out of office, out of power, and a true believer is in. And yet, this is what that looks like? Taking a holy holiday and using it to spew lies and political attacks against his opponents? Either I have a fundamental misunderstanding of what that religion represents, or he does, and no Republicans have the spine to speak out. And while they don't, I do want to remind you of a few people who did. One of those people is Bishop Marian Edgar Budde, who had the opportunity to speak directly to Trump when he first took office a few months back and didn't waste her opportunity.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land.
And let's be clear, what she's explaining here isn't some foreign concept for people who call themselves Christians. Showing empathy or caring about families is quite literally what Christianity is predicated on. And yet you can see on the faces of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump that being asked to follow these principles is deeply uncomfortable. Vance can hardly maintain eye contact. In fact, the whole Trump family seems to be crawling out of their skin when the president is told to follow the most basic tenets of the very religion that he claims to adhere to. Here's another person who isn't allowing Trump to co-opt the entire definition of Christianity, Texas state legislator James Tallarico.
Christian nationalists have taken Trump as their new Christ because he's everything the first one was not. Jesus was poor. Trump is rich. Jesus was meek. Trump is a bully. Jesus lost, and Trump is obsessed with winning. I honestly think that if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance met Jesus today, they would ridicule him as a single, childless, hippie. And in fact, Donald Trump Jr. explicitly rejected Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. He said, turning the other cheek has, quote, gotten us nothing. How did we get to the point where loving your enemy is weak and loving your neighbor is woke? I mean, they are literally rejecting the central teachings of Jesus because those teachings don't serve their own self-interest. Christian nationalism is not about the way of Jesus. It's about the pursuit of power.
And look, I am certainly no authority on Christianity or any religion, although by birthright I suppose that I'm an authority on bagels and guilt, but I can say with a degree of certainty that Donald Trump's platform and the platform that Republicans adhere to is wholly and completely antithetical to the teachings of all religions, but especially Christianity. He and Republicans are moving to strip the sick and elderly of health care by cutting $880 billion from Medicaid, a crucial lifeline for millions of low-income Americans, and $230 billion from food stamps. They passed tax cuts that overwhelmingly favor the rich, in stark contrast to Scripture condemning luxury. It was Jesus who said, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter heaven. And yet their entire economic agenda is a giveaway to those very people. And now Donald Trump is literally condemning someone like Abrego Garcia with zero evidence to a foreign prison in a country from which he sought refuge. I mean, come on, people. Jesus Christ himself was literally a refugee. How much more diametrically opposed to the teachings of Christ could you get than attacking refugees in the name of a refugee? Trump and his mouthpieces will hide behind Christianity while supporting policies that stand in stark contrast to the actual values of that religion. I mean, why are we pretending that we don't know what Jesus himself stood for? He was an immigrant who said to help the poor, welcome strangers, and called hypocrites wolves in sheep's clothing. And finally, I'll end with this, for those who still want to give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt as to his Christian bona fides. Do not forget that he was asked to name his favorite Bible verse, an otherwise basic question, at least for anybody who purports to follow the teachings of Christ. Here's what he had to say.
You mentioned the Bible. You've been talking about how it's your favorite book. And you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favorite Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal. So I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible, the whole Bible is an incredible, I joke very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
Which brings me to my favorite Bible verse. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves.